When you drag and drop an effect from the Effects panel onto a clip inside the timeline in Premiere Pro CS6, you're always doing so on a clip-by-clip basis. Now, you can nest a sequence, you can put a sequence inside another sequence, and you can apply an effect to that. And that's a way of applying an effect to multiple clips in a single step. And that really works, and it's one of the great benefits of nesting sequences. But it's not quite as flexible as having a way of applying a single effect to multiple clips on the timeline inside one sequence. But now in Premiere Pro CS6, the feature exists, and it's something that I've been asking for, and many editors have been asking for ages and ages. And it's called adjustment layers. And I'll show you how they work. Before I do, I must first of all give thanks to Nonpop Productions. Let me show you their logo here. Nonpop Productions very kindly gave us some of their media from a shoot. Check them out, nonpop.co.uk, and they've given us this media that we're using for this effects work. So, if I want to apply an effect to one of these clips, I would go to my Effects tab, find an effect, any old effect, drag it on, drop it, and go into the Effect Controls panel to adjust the settings. But look at this. If I go to my Project panel, in this new Item button menu, I've got an option called Adjustment Layer. As I say, this is just added with Premiere Pro CS6. Now, adjustment layers work a little bit like graphics and titles. They automatically take their width and height from the current sequence and the time base, the number of frames per second, and the pixel aspect ratio, the shape of the dots themselves. So I suppose what I'm saying is you don't really need to think about this as long as you have the sequence open at the time when you make the adjustment layer. I'm going to click OK. And here is my adjustment layer in my bin, or in this case, in my project panel. I'm going to drag and drop this onto the timeline, and I'm going to put it onto video 2. So it's in front of video 1. Anything above is in front in Premiere Pro. And now I'm going to click on the edge of this, and I'm going to drag to resize it. I'm going to trim this out to make it the duration of my sequence, or at least the duration of these clips. Now I've got snapping turned on the timeline, so it's just going to fill out and snap to the last frame automatically. And because adjustment layers behave a bit like graphics or titles, or photos for that matter, they have a theoretically infinite duration. In fact, by default, if you look in the preferences, you'll see there's a default still image duration here, which is 150 frames when you first install Premiere Pro. You can change that to whatever you want. Do make sure you change it before you import any graphics though, because the duration is set as you import them. So what's the big deal about adjustment layers? Well, have a look at this. I've got an effect preset that I made earlier, and it's a very simple one where I've used the fast color correction tool in Premiere Pro. And I'm going to drag and drop this not onto a clip, but instead onto my adjustment layer. There we go. Now, let's not worry too much about the fast color corrector settings. The main thing is that it's there. And what you'll notice is as I scrub through, that is, as I click on the timecode bar here and drag through my sequence, you'll notice that every single clip is being seen through the adjustment layer. Now, if you're used to working with Adobe Photoshop, you'll be thinking, yeah, okay, so what? I've seen this all before. And in fact, you might well be thinking that if you're used to working in Adobe After Effects, but this is new for Premiere Pro, and it's really spectacular because it gives you some very powerful new effects. You can see here I've got my scale adjusted on that clip. I'll just reset that so you can see it full screen. So the upside with adjustment layers is they allow you to apply an effect to multiple clips with a single segment on the timeline. And by trimming and adjusting where the adjustment layer appears, you can adjust which clips are affected by it. So for example, if I did not want this last shot to have the effect applied, I can just trim this back. And now I'm seeing the unmodified effect because the adjustment layer isn't in front. depending on the layer you place your adjustment layer on, you can decide to have one or other clip affected by it. For example, if I resize my timeline a bit so we can see video 3, let's take a look. Now here you can see this shot is a bit dark, and this is where problems come in with adjustment layers. Let me resize again so you can see here. The problem is that you really are applying exactly the same settings to every clip underneath the adjustment layer. And one way around this is to apply some color correction effects or some adjustments to your clips to standardize them all, to make them all about the same before you add your adjustment layer. And that way your adjustment layer is just used to create a look. One other thing you can do, of course, is either trim the adjustment layer back so that it's no longer in front of a clip, or just grab a clip that you don't want to be affected by the adjustment layer and drop it up in front of it, that is, above it. And here you can see I've got the clip without my adjustment layer simply because it's in front. And I suppose if I wanted to, I could always get my effect, I've just named this adjustment layer example here, I could always get that and drag and drop it onto the clip in the foreground. So now I'm still getting the effect, but I've got access to all of the controls for the effect for that individual clip. So I suppose I could always go in here and maybe lighten this shot up a little bit so that we can see a bit more of the shadows. It's a pretty dark shot anyway. So now I'm getting an effect that's got my preset on it, but it's not as severe as the effect applied to all of the other clips. If I were to go crazy and say that there are just 2 new features in Premiere Pro CS6 that for me as an editor are deeply awesome, I would say it was adjustment layers and the new JKL trimming function that allows you to dynamically apply trims. Adjustment layers opens up a whole new vista of potential ways of working with effects in Premiere Pro. And as I say, it's a new feature in Premiere Pro CS6. So that's working with adjustment layers in Premiere Pro.